Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. You love our next guest as the shrink with kink. I feel like I'm going to regret that phrase in a minute. On Showtime's Billions, but you can also catch Maggie Siff in the incredible revival of Sam Shepard's Curse of the Starving Class, now at the Signature Theater. Before she comes out and we talk everything Sam Shepard and, of course, talk about Billions, let's take a quick look at a clip of Billion. Everybody, please welcome Maggie Siff. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I am such a huge fan of your work on Billions, Sons of Anarchy, and now with Curse of the Starving Class, which is an incredible revival of this classic Sam Shepard play. Well, let's start with Billions, and then we'll talk about Sam Shepard and Curse of the Starving Class. Was it a pleasant surprise this season when they kind of wrote you out of the intimate scenes?
Well, I guess I didn't really think about it that way. It was a surprise.
Yeah.
You know, that turn where he announces to the world, you know, the information about his deviant private life, deviant in quotes. But
also, maybe one of the funniest moments in television history is Paul Giamatti with a nipple ring, and you going, "Did you do that yourself?"
I know, he's so brilliant. He can do anything.
Yeah.
He really can pull off anything. And you know, when I read that speech, the press conference, I was like, how's this gonna work? And he performed it so exquisitely. You really bought it, and it sort of catapulted the characters into a whole different terrain this season, which has been really exciting. But I was shocked that the writers did that. I never imagined that it would go there.
That wasn't you prior to the season start being like, "Hey guys, we've done enough."
No, it wasn't. I mean, I guess it's a piece of information that's always been sort of hanging over them as something that could be exploited or exploitable, and but I just didn't imagine that it would be like the public spectacle of it like that.
How much your character on Billions is always oscillating between doing not necessarily the right thing, but possibly the moral thing that might make her feel like a good person, and being the shark that is required of her. What is it like to sort of think about that? And what do you think of your character? Do you judge her ever? Or do you reserve judgment?
Well, I mean, I try to reserve judgment. I guess, when we first started doing the show, I had a lot of questions about what it meant to be a therapist and somebody whose purported goal is to help people, what it means that she wants to do that with billionaires and, people who are sort of at the top of their field, as opposed to like getting down in the trenches and really like helping people who might be more in need. And I started out thinking about it very morally. And as the show has progressed, I think the show has really become a study in how corrupting power itself is. And also, I think the character obviously has a great interest in being around powerful and very, very wealthy people. And therefore, she herself is not immune to those forces that are corrupting sort of everything around her. And so I think that's been a sort of interesting journey to take with her. And yet she does have this conscience that brings her back to herself, or some other version of her, some other part of herself.
She always seems to have a line in every season that she's not willing to cross, or that she doesn't want characters around her to cross, whether it's Axe or whether it's Chuck. And then they cross it, and she has to sort of move the goalpost even more for herself in a way.
Right. And she's made a number of decisions along the way where she the goalpost has been moved, and she reconciles herself again to this person or this situation, recommits, reassesses and recommits, and then she's further into the world and into the trenches and into the muck. Yeah. And it really sort of comes to a head this season.
I was shocked by her response to in the final moments of the last episode. I was shocked by her response to Chuck basically telling her he's not willing to sort of do the job for her, that he can't do it. I'm hoping that there's a little bit that was just sort of the surface of what she has to offer in this story, and that she knows that he's full of shit.
Right. Well, if I remember correctly, because I am not all the way caught up myself, she says, well, if you
probably shot this like 6 months ago or something.
She says, if you couldn't do it, then it can't be done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's more to come, but I think she takes him at his word in that moment, maybe reserving other parts of her mind to be suspicious or have questions.
The marriage was really on the fritz this season. Is it still so, you think, or like has she come back to him, or is this simply about the kids and about the sort of power the power of the relationship?
I think right now where we are in the season, she's I think she's just in a really murky, mucky place, and she doesn't know how to make a move one way or the other. But they're
I want her out on her own with Dan Soder.
That would be a spinoff.
Just such a weird relationship where he's clearly like you are so clearly the dominant one in the relationship.
I know. He's like a puppy dog that's been like kicked by the owner he loves or something. It's
Babe, do you want me to do the dishes, babe?
I know. He's so adorable. Yeah. I think that betrayal that, he commits in the marriage is sort of like, when I read the next episode, I was shocked she was still in the house with him, but, it all just feels like she's just trying to hold herself together so she can figure out how to get to the next day. So, that's what a lot of this season has been like for her, just trying to make it to the next day. It's like it took all the work, it took all, everything she could muster to just make it back into the office and turn the lights back on and open up her door. And, so it's one day at a time.
To maintain respect from everybody that worked for her, that she
Right.
worked with. They don't necessarily work for her, but they have to respect her, and they can't see her. In some ways, she's the therapist. She can't be seen as a human being with foibles or flaws of any kind. And
Right.
her husband stepping out and being like, we engage in BDSM,
Right.
really exposes her to these people.
Totally exposes her, and it did not take into consideration her at all, really, in any way, shape, or form. I mean, she's also just such a private person, and that's professionally what makes her so powerful. What allows her to be projected upon, or transference and counter, all of that stuff. And then she's also, she's somebody who really keeps herself compartmentalized and hidden from view. She says to him, you don't forget, like, you need this humiliation. You like this humiliation, but I don't. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And he goes and does it anyway.
Excuse me. We had Brian and David here a few weeks ago to
nice.
talk about the show, and one of the things that I put to them, which they refused to buck on, and it's okay, Brian, David, I get it, was that they believe that every character who says a reference actually knows that reference, and I was kind of like, I think some of them are just fun for you guys. They're your favorite things that you're throwing in there, and one of them that I said was a moment in an episode where you say to Axe, and I think David Costable, I think you say in Wags, and you say something along the lines of, this is like you going after Waingro in the hotel room. And I was like, I just don't know if Wendy may have seen Heat, but I don't know if she knows Heat to that extent.
Right. I guess the way I think about it as an actor and as a character is that there are certain things that Wendy has made it her business to know, because it's the language, it's the currency, it's the language that these guys operate with. You see Taylor do that a bit as well. Throw out references that you're like, really? Taylor knows that? Taylor goes that deep with that information? Because I think they've made it their business to know so they can operate in the world. So that's how I justify it to myself. I don't think Wendy herself is as big a fan of Heat as perhaps Bobby Axelrod is.
Right, when he's like, the Metrograph is showing Heat uncut this week, and I'm going to go down. So right now you are starring in a revival of Sam Shepard's Curse of the Starving Class at the Signature Theater. It's incredible. It has this amazing set piece that it opens with. I don't really want to give it away, but just know that when you sit down, something is going to happen at the beginning that is mind-blowing.
Don't walk in if you're late.
Yeah. Oh, if you're late,
come back the next day.
You're screwed.
Right.
Yeah. This is being directed by Terry Kinney, who also stars in Billions with you.
Yes.
How long had the two of you been talking about doing something, and how did you land on Sam Shepard?
Well, this was in the works for him for a while. This was not something we dreamed up together, but we'd been wanting to work together for a while in the theatrical realm. We both come from the theater. Obviously, he has a a very renowned past as a founder of the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, and I come from the theater, and so
The last time you were able to do, because you've been on TV now with Sons of Anarchy straight into Billions for the most part. When was the last time you were really able to do theater?
I did quite a lot while I was doing Sons. I would come back. We always shot that show in the summer, and then I would come back in the winter to do a play, which is just like brutal. But I loved it. So I did a fair amount of theater actually when I was doing that show. It's been about 6 years because I also had a child, which
Congrats.
the combination of like television plus child equals no theater.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
It's like for me, it just made it pretty hard until recently. So, but I've been wanting to come back and do something, and I was excited. I really like Sam Shepard a lot. I did a production of Live the Mind several years ago with the new group, and was excited to work on this play, which is kind of the first of a series of family plays that he wrote. And it's just it's the first time he really used a lot of autobiographical information that really fueled a lot of his seminal plays. And
absolutely, like as a person who's only seen True West and read Buried Child a number of times, seeing Curse of the Starving Class, you can see so much of those plays within this, just in terms of the son becomes the father.
The son becomes a father, the son becomes a father, the son, yeah.
Yeah, which is both True West and Buried Child and this, I believe.
It's all of them, yeah. And this idea of the sins of the father being visited upon the sins of the son, that's Ibsen. But like, inheriting this poison or this curse or this addiction, or what portion of our lives is fated and what portion of our lives is actually self-determined. Are we waking or are we sleeping? Are we walking around in a daze, or are we making true decisions? All these things that he really pondered within his own life and his own family and his relationship with his father and mother and stuff.
And also a want for escape. Every character is looking for an escape of some kind in this show. What is it like for you, though, to go from Wendy Rhodes, who's for the most part a fairly withholding character,
yes,
to something that allows you, at least by the end of this play, to get. You're on top of someone and yanking on them, and screaming, and you really get to lay it all out there.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great way to shake off a character. Theater is sort of fundamentally more extroverted. It really requires you to step outside of yourself, to inhabit a bigger size and a bigger space, and to reach a group of people in a room, and to do that vocally and physically. And I love it as a form. It's a very whole body, whole mind, whole heart kind of satisfying enterprise. Playing this character on Billions it's amazing, and she's an amazingly complicated person who gets to operate in all these different realms, but she is a very controlled and contained and measured and compartmentalized human being. And this play and this family and this play they're just really messy. They are the opposite. They are just visceral and vicious and ferocious and feral, and they can't help but let it all hang out. So it's fun to go from one to the other.
How is it doing Shepard monologues within his plays? Because his monologues are so different than the actual narrative that is sort of being worked up to in the play. Oftentimes it feels like the characters are sort of stepping out of the story completely and being much more lyrical than, even though the stories are fairly lyrical and strange in and of themselves, but the performer has to kind of work in this new song format that is different than maybe what the story has been building to.
Well, one of the things that's truly strange about this play is that it shifts tonally a lot. This one in particular, you're in a kitchen sink drama, and then you're in a farce, and then you're in somebody's mind. You're hearing an inner monologue. So, our challenge and what Terry has directed us to do is to just really commit to those shifts and go as far as you can in each of those directions. But it's tricky. It's tricky business, and you just have to sort of commit to it and and let yourself go.
You know, there's one of the questions that a question that an actor asks all the time is like, what does my character mean by this line? Or what does my character want? What is it like? I mean, when you're doing something like Billions, where a scene is a page and a half, 2 pages, and it has to be very clear what the character wants because it's driving the story forward. How do those questions go when it comes to Sam Shepard? Because there's a much more richer, deeper subtext than what is actually being said.
Well, he's so archetypal, you know, like the thing that just sort of leapt to my mind was like, you know, this idea of, I mean, for I think every character in that play, I would say the overarching goal is escape, 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 escape. You know, it's like a big archetypal goal. You could connect some psychological gesture to it, you know. And in television, it's, you know, in these long form storytelling phases, it's harder to sort of distill it down. But he's very, you know, Shepard in these plays, and especially this one, is so elemental. It's just like, you know, they want salvation, they want escape, they want to be numb, they want to turn off, they want to die, they want to eat. You know, they're all starving, right? It's just like,
but not totally starving. Right?
not totally starving, but, you know, metaphorically
we're hungry, but
starving.
we're not starving.
Right.
Isn't that the line that she says?
Yes, that's right. We're not part of the starving class. We're hungry, but we're not starving. Yeah.
What was it like going from working with Terry as a co-star or a scene partner to working with him as a director?
It was fantastic. He's a great actor. He's a lovely, warm human being, and I guess what was really great about it was to like get to know him in this other way that connects to such a deep part of his past and his life. You know, he really knows the theater, and his knowledge of Shepard in particular is really deep. He knew him. You know, he worked with him.
Foundation of Steppenwolf was right around the time that Shepard was kind of wasn't Steppenwolf founded in the early '80s, basically. Yeah. So Shepard at that time was basically on his
ascent.
Yeah,
yes,
ascent.
Yes. And they didn't do the original productions, but they did a lot of early productions of his plays. And Terry was talking to me one day, and he was like, you know, this is pretty classic. Early Steppenwolf theater. He's like, all we did was axe murderer theater. I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, you know, it's like the end of a play and you're just standing there covered in blood and there's, you know, everybody's been, you know, and, you know, and that's kind of, this play ends in a pretty apocalyptic place as well. But, you know, he just, his love of the material, his understanding of the style of the material and like what is required to really deliver it, I feel like is unusual and, you know, comes from his sort of deep history with his theater. And
I went looking, the opening set piece that, again, I'm not going to spoil for anybody who's going to go see it. That's not in the original text, right? That is of Terry's design and
Julian Crouch, our brilliant set designer. Yes,
right. It's fascinating. I was wondering. Yeah, I was like. A friend and I were trying to figure out, and we went back and looked at the text, and like, no, it's not there.
No, it's just a bare bones kitchen.
Wow.
Yeah, his sets tended to be very, very plain and very simple, and he liked them that way, and he actually, in his life, kind of objected to making big stylistic or symbolic choices with the set design. He wanted the plays to do that. I sort of think that, you know, he might not have been the best interpreter of his work in a way, because I feel like the plays are they're so rich and they're so symbolic, and they really lend themselves to, you know, a scenic expression of some of the things that are going on in the play, like so beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense that the writer would be like, do not heighten my words. They are heightened enough.
Yeah.
And a director could come in and say, no, we can make something even more surreal
Yeah.
and even more outrageous. There's a couple actors that are in the show with you. I mean, everybody is really fantastic. But one actor who really, outside of you, who really stole the show for me was the guy who plays the owner of the Alibi bar.
Yes.
What is that actor's name?
Esau Pritchett, yeah.
He's amazing. I had never seen him before.
Yeah.
And he just walks in, larger than life, literally
Yes.
bigger than everybody, almost bigger than the
I
stage
know.
itself.
I know.
And he's so incredible.
Yeah, and he walks in like, an hour and 20 into the show. Like, he really shows up out of nowhere, and you're like, what is going on?
And then the actor who plays your husband as well is just really fantastic.
David Warshawski, yeah.
Yeah, really fantastic.
Yes, he's an amazing, he's one of those guys that you're like, when you see him, he's been in a million films, and he's like an incredible actor, and also has deep, deep theater roots, and, he runs the theater program at USC now as well, and he is a huge lover of Sam Shepard, so he's a great interpreter of his work.
As a person who came from theater and then is doing television now for, what is it, going on like 12 years probably?
Something like that, yeah.
If you go an extended period of time, like you had 6 years without doing theater, do you start to feel it? Is it something, do you end up kind of jonesing to get on stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's such a difficult process putting up a play. It's really, I've been saying this a lot lately. It's a little bit like deciding you're gonna like get into a boat and head right into a storm. It's really challenging. It's hard to get it right. It's hard to to throw yourself up against things. You have to make some bad choices to arrive at good ones. Like I say, it's a very extroverted form, especially this kind of material.
When you say bad choices to arrive at good ones, are you talking about during the rehearsal process?
Hopefully, yes.
Which is not something that you have time for in
It's not something you have time for in television because there really is no rehearsal process. So, you make choices, you play as much as you can at home. Usually what's happening is happening on a more nuanced level. And then you come in and you can try this and that, but you don't have a lot of time to F around.
Do you find that the choices that you make for scenes on television are much smaller because you don't have the time to risk the failure of what might be a big choice in a moment?
Probably. I mean, I can't say for sure. I mean, there are definitely, I think you need a little bit of help in television to make a big choice. You kind of need a director to come in and say, okay, we're taking all day with this scene. Every once in a while there's a scene where they're like, this scene is so important, we have all day, or we have half the day. And you're like, okay, we can really do something here,
Can you remember a previous scene from this season or something where you may have done that?
There was a lot of time allotted for, I think it was in episode, I can't remember if it was episode 3 or 4. It was the scene where after he's given the speech.
Right.
And I come into the office, and we have this big fight.
That's the one. Not far enough, right?
Yes, that's right. Not far enough. That won't be far enough. Thank you. They left a lot of time for us to work on that. So there are some scenes like that where they leave a lot of time and space, and they understand that it's going to be an undertaking, and they want to shoot it in a way that's pretty complex. So that's one way that you can be helped. Sometimes a director comes in and is like, I have this idea, and has a really physical idea about what it should be. And then you can execute it. You can be like, okay, because they've set it up in their minds and they know how they're going to get the cameras to do it and everything else. And,
How often is that a good thing when a director shows up on television and goes, I've got a big idea today, guys?
I think it depends on who you ask. I always enjoy it. I'm like, great, let's do it.
Well, the writers are like, come on.
Right, sometimes, yes. Yeah. That's right. But luckily, Brian and Dave they're around a lot, and it's really great that they're around a lot, because if you come in with a cockeyed idea, they can be like, mm-mm, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. But they also seem quite collaborative. I mean, I don't think you would get a show where this many personalities pop the way that they do.
Yes.
And sort of quirks pop the way that they do if you weren't allowing people to
Absolutely.
bring their ideas to the table.
They're very collaborative, and they're also real observers. So they talk to you, and they get to know who you are, and all the characters, all those great personalities at like Axe Cap, those guys all percolate to the surface because Brian and Dave they love who they are as people, and they want to bring all those personalities, sort of traits, to the surface, and they write to it, and they write to who's working for them in a great way.
Yeah, I think I have a question from Twitter. It's Maggie, you're brilliant on Billions. My question: what was your reaction when learning that Wendy violated her patient's trusts? Are we going to see a possible redemption?
Yeah, I was and I wasn't surprised. I mean, I knew that they were wading me into sort of morally murkier territory. And I knew that she was out to get Taylor, and that, she was sort of revenge at any cost was sort of on her mind. So I was a little surprised, but I was also kind of interested in it. Like, in general, I've been interested to see Wendy take the darker swerves. Partly because it's a show about dark swerves, and I'd like to be at the heart of it,
I was surprised that she was going after Taylor the way that she was. When it took the turn, I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was bummed out, but I was kind of like, oh, I thought they had like a real relationship here in some way.
I mean, I think they did. I think they do. I mean, I think it's
exactly
twisty. Yeah.
That's like every relationship on Billions.
Yeah.
Deep in there somewhere, there is something real, but there's just layers and layers of backstabbing and bullshit.
Because anything real is exploitable too.
Exactly.
It becomes information. If somebody crosses whatever that line is for them, then everything they know about that person becomes information and becomes weaponized. And, yeah. But I do think Wendy has a conscience, and I think there's hope for redemption.
We have a couple questions in the audience. Who's a question?
I do.
Right here.
Hey, Maggie. First, I want to say how much I love your show, and your portrayal of Wendy is amazing. So
thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah. So 2 questions for you. How much of the show's full story arc do you know ahead of time as you're portraying your character? Because obviously there are twists and turns. And do you find it more gratifying playing powerful Wendy or now vulnerable Wendy?
So Brian and Dave sit down with some of us, like before we shoot the season, and they give us some of the broad strokes. But yes, there are these twists and turns, and often I'll come to them and I'll be like, I don't know, why am I doing this? What's going on? And they'll be like, come talk to us, and they'll give me some more information so that I know sort of where I'm headed. I mean, in general, they try to let us know what we need to know, and then if you start poking around or having a problem or whatever, they'll be like, let's talk about this. And they're very collaborative, so they also appreciate information and ideas and stuff like that. What was the second part of your
Do
question?
you prefer playing
yes.
vulnerable Wendy or in control, powerful Wendy?
I mean, I guess I like them alongside each other, I mean, powerful Wendy is fun. She's fun to play. She's, I like her sense of humor. I like her ability to roll with whatever comes at her. There's a lot of pleasure in sort of finding the way any of those guys can say anything to her, and she's like, okay. It's very enjoyable. But I like seeing her cracks too, because I think it's a more complete portrait of who somebody like that actually is.
Next question. Hi.
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 I'm about to graduate from acting school.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so my question is, what were your first steps when you finished school?
Are you undergrad?
Yes.
Yeah. I had sort of a, I was living I went to college outside of Philadelphia, and so I was in a smaller place. And I just started working with small theater companies who were making work and seeing a lot of theater and getting to know the theater community. I mean, I feel like that's just where you have to start. You just have to get familiar with the lay of the land and see as much as you can and meet the people who are making interesting things and go to preview performances when creators are still around and, you know, try to get in there and work at a theater, you know, you just have to like start mucking around. It's a terrible answer, but it's the only one I got.
I mean, the version of that answer that people normally say is find a scene and like, or find a group of people and collaborate. And the only way to do that is to do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Muck around.
Muck around, take a class, you know, yeah.
One more question.
Hi, my name is Marissa. I'm an actress too, and I love Wendy. I love your job. Congratulations, I love Billions. And my question is, which advice that you gave in the show to someone that you're using to yourself in your life, personal and your professional life?
I mean, I'm not going to be able to think of something right here specific to what I've said on the show, but I will say this, that I believe mostly Wendy's whole job is to help people get out of their own way. That's kind of how I think about it, you know, because she's working with people who need to make very quick decisions, and they need to be sort of as rational as they can be and operating from a place of instinct. So I think about that a lot. I mean, I think about, like, how am I interfering with myself right now? How am I creating static for myself in this situation? Could I be seeing this more clearly? And I would say that's a Wendy-inspired thought.
That's great advice, though, too. It's about being present in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Being present to your own neurosis.
That's
you
the
know.
static.
That's the static,
That's
yes.
the static
no.
that you got to kind of
Yeah.
push away a little
Exactly, yeah.
bit. Maggie, I love Billions so much. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank
and
you for
Curse of the
having me.
Starving class is incredible. You're amazing
Thank
in
you,
it.
thank you.
It is at the Signature Theater, the Pershing Square Theater at Signature Theater on 42nd Street. Billions is on Sunday nights on Showtime. Everybody give Maggie Siff a huge round of applause for coming by.
Thank you.